Today's topic is leadership and influence. Most leaders want more influence, but they're not sure how to get it. So we brought in an expert. This is part 3 in a 3-part series with Alan Weiner. He is the author of the new book called the Highflier Handbook, which is going to show you how to be seen as a leader in the first place and how to become a leader over time. We're going to start right in with this idea of influence, just to make sure we have a common understanding of it, because it means a lot of things to a lot of people, Alan. What's at the heart of influence skills? Or in other words, if a leader's job description said influence skills absolutely necessary, what does that mean?
It means taking someone else's attitude from where it is to where you want it to be. So all of us have an attitude about so many topics that's generally somewhere on a 7-step scale between I agree and I don't agree. So if I'm talking to you and we're talking about a political candidate, if you are somewhere like a number 4 on a 7-step scale, and I want to get you closer to my attitude, which is a number 2, then if I can do that, I have influence skills. What does it take to move your attitude, in my example, from 4 to 2?
Okay, so it's really about changing people's mind at least a bit somewhere on the scale. Now, there are 2 sides to the coin when it comes to what we might call power and influence, and both sides of the coin are communication. So I want to start by talking about delivery. What's good delivery and why is it important to have it?
Well, there's a certain amount of enthusiasm that the listener would expect me to have about my attitude. So my delivery might be possibly a little louder, certainly a little slower, particularly a little slower. So there's research that would say the faster I talk, while it may sound youthful and enthusiastic, the slower I talk, the wiser and more thoughtful it sounds. So if we just take that one category of speed, slower, if it is in fact more thoughtful, is extremely important.
I'll go through a quick checklist here for the viewer. Volume, like you mentioned, livelier facial expressions, posture and active gestures, and figurative language and analogies and metaphors, some ways to enhance our message. But then on the other side of the coin, also communication. This coin is the same coin, communication. You talk about the quality of the content in terms of being disciplined, organized, and data-driven. Tell us more about that.
I'm interested in the things that one person says to another that make the listener say, wow, I didn't know that. Something new. Well, that is data-driven, usually means there's a statistic. There's a number somewhere in the sentence that makes the listener say, wow, I didn't know that. So content has to be, here's my belief, here's what I think, here's why I say that, and here's a data point to support that.
You're building a mini argument.
Right.
Instead of just using emotional urgency or merely good delivery, merely good eye contact, for example, or a confident voice, you're giving quality content by building a mini argument for the point you're making.
Right. When somebody in a meeting says, okay, does anyone have anything else to say on this? I want participants to say to themselves, I'm going to say something compelling. Main point, I think it's a good idea. Sub point, I say that because it's going to be faster. Data point, I have evidence that it's going to be 20% faster than it's been. That's worth saying when someone says, anybody have something to add?
You can hear that if people talk like this in a room full of intelligent people, it's going to move them along that influence scale.
Exactly. Now we're getting from 4 to 2.
Now on the third side of the coin, which is a joke, of course, there's no third side down. You talk about the risks of using complex language in terms of our influence. So what's the downside of using what people might call vocabulary words or jargon?
Well, it takes more time for the listener to process what they've heard. They're saying to themselves, what exactly am I hearing here? You know where this happens, Alex, so often is on PowerPoint slides. Somebody else sometimes is putting the slide together, or my client is, in the example, is putting the slide together, and they have a habit of using 2 and 3 syllable versions of what otherwise would be 1 syllable words. So all of a sudden, you'll see a word like functional, appear in a slide or expressed, like this isn't appropriately functional, then the listener has to say to themselves, wait, what exactly does that mean? When it could have been, this is not going to work. It's not the right way to do it, which, as you hear it, are all one-syllable words. I have often said to people, I have never said to my wife, let me provide you with the information that you'll need. If she says to me, how do I get to Newhall? I don't say, let me provide you. But it happens at work all the time.
Let's pretend we're in a public speaking situation. You're going to lose a percentage of the audience for every word like that you use, every jargon or vocabulary word. We think it makes us sound smart. Maybe we do it because we're trying to impress people, but it usually has the opposite effect. And then we lose influence instead of gain it. If you want to have influence, you got to speak in a language that everybody understands. I've been preaching that on my channel for a long time.
One of my favorites is the word moribund. If someone said, we used to do it this way, and it was very good, it worked, but it's been moribund. Now, listeners saying, moribund? What's moribund? Well, moribund means it's been dead for a while. We could bring it back to life. And wouldn't that be more interesting? This is something that we can breathe life into. Is so much better than it's been moribund.
That's a great example. Very few people will follow along with moribund, but breathe life back into is something everybody will be able to follow.
Right.
So if we want to have more influence, you talk about the importance of storytelling. So what are some tips that you would give us if we want to become better storytellers?
Okay, so there's two things about storytelling, and one of them is, I think, really fascinating. And that is that all children's stories begin with once upon a time. And as soon as a child hears that, they know a story's about to come. Well, for adults, the adult version of once upon a time is something like about a month ago. So if Alex says to Alan, can you talk to the group about how this whole thing developed? I start a story with the words like, well, about a month ago, Jack was talking to Jill about this topic. Jack said X, Jill said Y, and that conversation leads us to where we are today. So storytelling, that's one tip, usually starts by taking people into the past with words like about a month ago. I think the listener automatically says, oh, good, I'm about to hear something interesting, right? The other aspect of storytelling is getting very familiar with the framework to express an idea. Frameworks mean, as an example, do I go from main point to subpoint to data point? Do I go from data point to subpoint to main point? Do I use the elevator ride of problem, cause, consequence, solution? So if Alex says to Alan, why don't you tell the group how this came about? I tell myself, I'm going to say something like, well, the problem has been that the customers are unhappy with what we've sent them. The reason is it's too complex for them to put together. The risk we run if we don't fix it is they're going to find another vendor to supply them with it. My suggestion is that we spend some time putting together an alternative and send it to them. That's a story. Problem, cause, consequence, solution. I might say, by the way, that in the category of keeping your eyes and ears open for what's going on, most TV commercials, especially in pharmaceuticals, the story is told is problem, cause, consequence, solution. So I always say to my clients, just watch that and say to yourself, if they can tell a story about a drug in 30 seconds, why can't I?
Yeah, that's a great example. I actually use pharmaceutical examples as well for when I talk about the taking people on a persuasive journey because they do it so well.
Right.
You know, it's incredible. And I say, listen, you got to be ethical, right? We're not suggesting you exaggerate the benefits here or downplay the risks. Advertisers use this for a reason. It's very, very persuasive. And if you talk like this, it's going to be much more influential than if you just think off the top of your head or you talk as you think out loud. You need a clear framework. Frameworks are really persuasive. You combine that with clear language. And of course, back in the day, you taught me the value of the frameworks when I was interning with you and then employed by you. Really sold me on that. So we'll make sure to keep passing on the word. And if you want to hear more about Alan's book, of course, you can go get it on Amazon. It's called the Highflier Handbook. and it's available now. You can take a look yourself. I'll put links in the description below this video. So this is the end of a 3-part series of conversations on how people can become leaders at work. Thank you so much, Alan, for hanging out with me and my subscribers.
It's been a pleasure.